Mauritius miracle. Introduction. The Mauritian miracle is the term economists use to describe their astonishment at how well the Mauritian economy has developed during the past decades. Since its independence, people have been surprised that Mauritius's economy continued to grow when renowned economists predicted the contrary. The Sustainable Competitiveness Observatory (SCO) ranks Mauritius's attractiveness as the leading African country in 2016, just behind China. The tiny archipelago of the Indian Ocean does better than South Africa, second, and even more surprisingly better than Brazil and India. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel for yet another exciting video. If you love the content, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Mauritius geography and demography. Mauritius is one of the densest populated countries in the world, with a population of 1.3 million over a 2040 square kilometers area. The island was not predestined to be a land of economic performance. At the beginning of independence in 1968, agriculture was at the core of the local economy. Agriculture was then mainly dependent on the sugar sector, vulnerable regarding trade and unfavorable geographically due to the remoteness of its main trading partners. The country was also facing high population growth, coupled with a high unemployment rate in a context conducive to ethnic tensions. Neither James Meade nor Vidyadhar Napal, respectively Nobel Prize winners in economics, 1977, and literature, 2001, predicted a bright future for the island. However, Mauritius has experienced one of the most rapid developments in African history. From 1969 to 2013, the average annual GDP growth was 5.3% compared to 3.8% for sub-Saharan Africa. The Mauritian miracle has enabled the island to move from a low-income country to an upper-middle-income country. The 1970s were marked by a strong government commitment to diversify the economy and to provide more high-paying jobs to the population. The promotion of tourism and the creation of the EPSs did much to attain these goals. Between 1971 and 1977, about 64,000 jobs were created. However, in a rush to make work, the government allowed EPS firms to deny their workers fair wages, the right to organize and strike, and the health and social benefits afforded to other Mauritian workers. The boom in the mid-1970s was also fueled by increased foreign aid and exceptional sugar crops, coupled with high world prices. The economic situation deteriorated in the late 1970s. Petroleum prices rose, the sugar boom ended, and the balance of payments deficit steadily rose as imports outpaced exports. By 1979, the deficit amounted to a staggering US $111 million. Mauritius approached the IMF and the World Bank for assistance. In exchange for loans and credits to help pay for imports, the government agreed to institute specific measures, including cutting food subsidies, devaluing the currency, and limiting government wage increases. By the 1980s, thanks to a widespread political consensus on broad policy measures, the economy experienced steady growth, declining inflation, high employment, and increased domestic savings. The EPS, with investment from China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, came into its own, surpassing sugar as the principal export-earning sector and employing more workers than the sugar industry and the government combined, previously the two largest employers. In 1986, Mauritius had its first trade surplus in 12 years. Tourism also boomed, with a concomitant expansion in hotel beds and air flights. An aura of optimism accompanied the country's economic success. It prompted comparisons with other Asian countries with dynamic economies, including Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. The economy had slowed down by the late 1980s and early 1990s. Still, the government was optimistic that it could ensure the country's long-term prosperity by drawing up and implementing prudent development plans. A stock exchange opened in Port Louis in 1989. As of 1993, Mauritius had a gross domestic product (GDP) estimated at US $8.6 billion, with a growth rate of 5.5% and an inflation rate of 10.5%. Reforms. After independence in 1968, Mauritius obtained export quotas from the Sugar Protocol to the European Union (EU). The Multi-Fiber Agreement of 1974 also created an institutional environment favorable to establishing foreign investors in the textile sector. Scholars argue that the institutions established by Prime Minister Ramgoolam and those responsible for the transition to independence have enabled the country to manage optimally the economic benefits generated by these two mechanisms. These advantages were undeniable since, between 1977 and 2000, the EU guaranteed price per ton of sugar was, on average, 90% higher than the international market price. Economists estimate the average annual contribution of the sugar rent to Mauritius's GDP for the period 1977 to 2000 at 5.4%. At its peak, the impact of the multi-fiber agreement culminated at 3.5%. The factor that led to the high growth rate. Recent reports on the progress of the Millennium Development Goals by the Overseas Development Institute indicated several critical reasons for economic success. 1. Unorthodox liberalization and diversification. Liberalization occurred in phases to build on the economy's advantages in the international market. In the 1970s, Mauritius profited from sugar rents, established an export processing zone (EPZ), and successfully attracted capital and foreign investment in manufacturing from China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Additionally, from 1980s to 1990s, EPZ expanded and led to a significant increase in foreign direct investment (FDI) and tourism. Preferential access to sugar and clothing markets amounted to 7% of GDP in the 1980s and 4.5% in the 1990s. Capital and current accounts were liberalized, contributing to an investment and employment boom, and the high inflow of FDI brought with it managerial skills. Finally, from the 1990s to 2010, further diversification, liberalization, and investment as Chinese investors left to pursue investments in Africa and China. Effective political and economic governance. The primary source of Mauritius's attractiveness remains its effective political and economic governance. Over the 52 African countries ranked in 2016 and submitted to the benchmarking of the major emerging countries, Brazil, China, India, Mauritius is first of the class with a score of 100, more than twice the average African score, 48, ahead of South Africa, 78, and China, 52. Mauritius stands out for its economic governance because of the efficiency of its public authorities and the quality of its regulations. The island is second behind China for the facilitation of the business environment. On a more political level, the institutional choices made by the authorities in the transition to independence have enabled the country to maintain specific political stability. Mauritius is in the third tier of countries that respect political and individual rights, on par with Botswana regarding political stability. Infrastructures. With a score of 84, Mauritius is the African country with the best infrastructure. It outperforms China, but also the countries of North Africa and Seychelles. An illustration of this performance, however, favored by the country's small size, the African average stands at only 30. With 1196 kilometers of roads per square kilometers, the road network is very dense, 98% of which is paved. Mauritius is on the African average due to its logistics performance and connectivity to international ports. Regarding telecommunications, access to the internet and mobile telephony remains among the best on the continent. In terms of energy, Mauritius is above the African average, not only in terms of access to service, but also in terms of the quality of electricity supply. However, Mauritius remains vulnerable to external energy shocks, especially since 80% of its energy comes from fossil fuels. To reduce this dependence and move towards a low-carbon economy, the Mauritian government launched a project in November 2017 to increase the share of renewable energy in the energy mix to 35% by 2025, thereby reducing carbon dioxide production by 4.3 million tons. The market. Mauritian performances are much lower in the market section. Mauritius scores 63 out of 100 and ranks 10th in Africa. The country's geographical position remains a handicap. Due to its remoteness, Mauritius's regional market is minimal and weakly dynamic. Over the period between 2011 and 2015, there was a regional average annual growth rate of 2.5%, while the African average reached 4%. At the national level, the yearly average growth rate from 2011 to 2015 aligns with African standards. With a GDP per capita in 2016 of $9,822, 92% of the population lives above $1.25 per day, and per capita, the United Nations poverty line, Mauritius has a middle class that constitutes a significant domestic market. Mauritius ranks 5th in terms of attractiveness for foreign direct investment, FDI, with an estimated stock of FDI per capita of US $3,605. The island does better than the African average, $1,900, but far from the $30,000 per capita of Seychelles. Human and financial assets. Mauritius's attractiveness also depends on its human and financial capital. With a 93 out of 100, the island is in the second position in South Africa and far above the African average, 47. Mauritius has an efficient education system with literacy and gross enrollment rates at over 95%. The introduction of compulsory education up to 16 in 2005 greatly improved access to secondary education and provided schools with modern infrastructure. There is an average of 19 pupils per class in primary school, compared to 41 pupils in African countries. On a financial side, the stock exchange of Mauritius is the second largest stock exchange in Africa, after South Africa, with a market capitalization that reaches 62% of GDP. Mauritius's banking system is the most pro-business in Africa. In 2016, the latter granted loans to the private sector for 97% of the GDP. Doing Business 2017 ranks Mauritius as the fourth African country in terms of procedures for obtaining bank loans. Future growth. Announced in 2014, the plan for a second miracle is expected to make Mauritius a high-income country by 2020, a real challenge. Notably, an average annual growth rate of 5% would be required to achieve this objective by 2021. However, the end of trade preferences for textile exports in 2005 and the total dismantling of the sugar protocol in 2017 forced local actors to invent a new economic model. Textile sector activity is contracting, mainly because of cost arbitrage, leading major international contractors to retreat to places where labor prices are the cheapest, particularly in countries such as Bangladesh and Ethiopia. Growth drivers are possible, especially in the service sector. Tourism has grown considerably in recent decades. As in the financial sector, services with high productivity are gradually emerging, backed by the effective use of new information technologies. To do this, the authorities focus on technology promoting innovative city entrepreneurship, luxury tourism, and the blue economy and tax incentives. The assessment of Mauritian performance by the OECD reveals that despite unfavorable economic geography, the island has good governance and many assets, including infrastructure and human and financial capital, to become a high-income country by 2020. To this end, the Mauritian authorities are focusing on high-tech and high-value-added sectors such as biotechnology, intelligent cities, and luxury tourism to maintain growth in the medium and long term. What other African countries can learn? Overall, Mauritius's economic miracle is remarkable and sets precedents for other African countries with the ambition of becoming a high Human Development Index country. There you have it. Thank you for giving me your audience. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, share, comment, and hit the notification bell to get notified of other similar content I post.